Alberta's great, and I want to keep it that way. I'm discussing all that and more with Kris Sims of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm Sheila Gunn Reid, and you're watching The Gunn Show. This free episode of The Gunn Show is brought to you by...
Adam Sos here for Rebel News. You know, our company is growing quickly, and we'd actually like for your company to grow too. That's why this ad space that I'm speaking through right now is actually available for you to purchase. So instead of people listening to me, they could actually be learning about your company, learning about your business. If this interests you, if this is an opportunity you'd like to capitalize on, send us an email at ads@rebelnews.com.
It should come as no surprise to regular viewers of the show that I am not only a proud Albertan, but I'm an Alberta evangelist. I think this is the greatest place in Canada to live. And I feel that way, of course, because I'm a lifelong Albertan and I'm proud of where I come from. But I also feel that way because I travel outside of Alberta for work. And you sort of forget how great it is where you are until you're exposed to how bad it is in other places. Like when I travel to Toronto, no offense, Torontonians, or Ottawa, or even Vancouver, Albertans are culturally distinct. And I think that's why we are sort of incompatible with the federal government sometimes. We don't like being told what to do. That's why we moved out here to the middle of nowhere. We like to help each other, but we don't need the hand of government in between ourselves and our relationship with our neighbors. And even when our government wanders into tyranny, Jason Kenney, I'm talking about you, the people, as Kian Simone's incredible documentary details, are ungovernable. We don't like being told by the government how to live our lives. And we also believe that government should be small, maybe fit inside of a teacup, or in my case, on a postage stamp, because a large government is an expensive government. And I'm so fascinated by my friend Kris Sims of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, because she moved to Alberta from BC. She chose us, and she has become an Alberta evangelist just like me, talking about how our tax regime here makes life more affordable. And she is also keenly aware of the problems of Alberta's existence within Canadian Confederation and how we fix that. So joining me now in an interview we recorded yesterday afternoon is my friend Kris Sims, the Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Take a listen. This free episode of The Gunn Show is brought to you by
my mug. I know, it's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
So joining me now is my friend Kris Sims. She's the Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm very excited to talk to her. We had a very vigorous conversation even before we started recording, because it's so nice to be able to talk to another conservative woman. But yes. Kris, you're new here to Alberta, but it feels like you've been here forever, because I think you have this sort of Alberta attitude. But as I was saying before I hit record, that I like Catholicism. I'm always curious about the new converts. I was born into it, so I'm always curious why people choose it. And as a born and raised Albertan, multi-generational farmer, I'm always curious about why people choose us when they could really go anywhere in the country or even anywhere in the world. So, Kris, why did you pack up your family and move to small town Alberta? I'd love to hear this story.
Great question. And it's great to actually see you in person. Insider tip, I've gotten mistaken for Sheila now 3 times since I've been in Alberta. So that was pretty cool. I took it as a compliment. So there's many reasons. One, I've got a lot of roots here in Alberta. My family worked in the oil patch back in the 70s and 80s before it was nuked by the first Trudeau, much similar to your experience with your family, Sheila. Also, I've got roots here around Stettler and Sundre and Bergen. They actually manage a lot of the rodeo stock for the Calgary Stampede. So lots of folks and kinfolk there. Also, it's currently our speed for our family. To borrow a phrase from Pierre Poliver, the government of British Columbia had gotten real big and really bossy. And that's not my speed at all. And the affordability factor is huge. They were selling tear down houses. I mean, buy it, knock it down into the ground for more than $800,000 in Hope. So that's my hometown where I grew up as a little kid. It's about 2 hours outside of Vancouver. Pretty little town, 4,000 people in it, but it's not exactly an easy commute. 800 grand. They sold this house and they ripped it down. I went, you know what? We just can't do this anymore. So we packed up, and thank goodness the Taxpayers Federation had a role for me here in Alberta, and we moved here in July.
Now, you really have hit the ground running. Like, to talk to you, you've been here forever, and you are really do sort of understand where we're coming from with regard to our disputes with the federal government and feeling as though we're being treated unfairly within Confederation. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, you wrote a really excellent article breaking down why Albertans like you feel like we're getting a raw deal from the federal government.
Yeah, we are getting a super raw deal from the federal government, and Albertans have every right to be angry. It's not a figment of your imagination. So I wrote that for many reasons. One, because as a very proud Western Canadian, again, I've always lived in rural Western Canada, except for when I worked on Parliament Hill, and we were out in Ottawa for more than 15 years. And that brought up my reason for writing it. I worked with so many people, hardworking, interesting folks, intelligent, kind, sensitive types in Ottawa, on Parliament Hill, in journalism, in newsrooms. And to hear them still like not getting it, like not understanding, hey, what's all the fuss about Alberta? What's the big deal with you guys? I felt that I needed to write it out in 5 main points. So I tried to articulate it from the Canadian taxpayers' perspective as best we could, including things like the fact that we're getting ripped off on equalization, that we're paying the highest carbon taxes after the rebates of any province in Canada, and the gun grab. The recent expansion of Bill C-21 is crazy pants because we have got the highest per capita firearms ownership, as you know, here in Alberta. I think it was more than 300,000 registered gun owners here in this province. It's a major part of our culture, and it just wasn't getting through to the halls of power in Ottawa. And so that is why I wrote that for the Sun media chain. And hopefully some folks are taking some notes from it and they'll start listening a bit better.
Yeah. You know, when I look at that gun ban, as a gun owner, of course, I'm personally affected by it.
Me too.
Yeah. But there's a certain level of bigotry, I think, against Westerners, against rural people, that we are being scapegoated for the crimes and the failings of progressive policies in Canada's big cities. But it speaks to the bubble in which these politicians are operating, because as you point out, 300,000 plus registered firearms owners here in Alberta. We disproportionately bump the numbers of gun owners up in Canada because there's, I think it's like 2.2 million or licensed firearms owners in the country. And by and large, per capita, a vast majority of those come from Alberta. And it's truly an attack on our property rights, but also Western culture.
Yeah, for sure. For folks who are listening to this, if for some reason, if you don't understand firearms culture, you probably do. They're tools in the hands of legal, law-abiding gun owners. I'm not talking about gangbangers with stolen handguns. It's a completely different world. For those of us who are legal firearms owners, it's like owning a chainsaw.
Yeah.
or a snowmobile. Like both could be potentially dangerous in the wrong hands.
Or my golf clubs. That's still like, that's a hobby. I'm not great at it. I can bludgeon you to death with it.
You could.
but it's a thing I like to do. It's a sport that I like to do.
Exactly. And so with firearms, sure. Yeah, like they're a powerful thing and you need to be super responsible when you own them. And if there's one character attribute I would say that is consistent across all legal law abiding firearms owners, it is that they're super rules based. Like they're really uptight, let's tick all of our boxes type people. And ranchers will have a long gun to get rid of coyotes, for example. We've got hunters across Western Canada. I was raised on hunted moose meat and deer meat. Lots of folks go out hunting, especially every fall. And there's also sports shooters. There are sharpshooter like expert folks in that field, and they go to big championship meets and they're really good. Some of the best marksmen in the world have come from Canada. And so, yeah, it's a big part of the culture of Western Canada. And I don't think a lot of folks, say in the Eastern urban city set, I don't think they realize two things. One, they don't realize how arduous it is to get a gun license in Canada. They don't realize that you go through a huge, deep background check. The RCMP call your spouse. They phone them. They talk to them on the phone.
Not just your spouse, your ex.
Yeah, all your exes.
It's very invasive.
I was super lucky there because I married my high school sweetheart. So the list was short. But yeah, you're right. Just imagine going through all your exes. They contact your employer, all the whole shebang. And you have to go through a big course that is typically taught by a former Mountie. And you got to ace your tests. You can't be squeaking through with a C- there. And then you're allowed to own just a rifle or a shotgun. And you got to show your license to buy ammo. You got to show your license to move it, everything. If you wanted to be a legal handgun owner, that's a whole nother kettle of fish.
It's worse. Yeah. You have to call and ask somebody in an office in, Antigonish or some Miramichi, some faraway place. You have to call and ask them, can I take this thing to the gun range, which is the only place I'm allowed to use it? And you have to ask them permission, go straight there and come straight back. It's outrageous that the government is attacking people like me and people like, as you say, these people who are hyper vigilant about the rules, because you'll end up in jail if you don't follow them.
Yeah, it's super serious. Yeah.
Instead of focusing resources on gangsters and securing a porous border that is allowing illegal firearms to flood into this country.
And you bring up a great point there, which is our main reason. I mean, we're the tax people. Why are we getting involved in a gun issue? That's the main reason we're getting involved is twofold. One, the police themselves. Okay. Right. The police union members who are on the front lines of all this stuff, they say this won't make Canadians safer, that we should be focusing our resources on other things like illegal gun activity. And two, we don't have another $1 billion to spend on this firearms confiscation. Anyone who's watching this probably remembers the old long gun registry. That was supposed to cost a couple $1 million here or there in the 1990s. Oopsie, it wound up costing around $2 billion. And that was just for registering.
Yeah, that's just keeping track of them.
That is not sending a bureaucrat to people's homes to collect a firearm every single time. Like, it's just the logistics of it. When you add government, is mind-boggling. I'd be surprised if it only cost another $1 billion, and that's coming from a criminologist at SFU. So we're more than $1 trillion in debt. Taxpayers do not have this money to spend. And so that's why we're getting in the fight now to head it off before it happens. And what I was really interested in is that our own CFO here in Alberta, Terry Bryant, also said this would be a misallocation of taxpayers' resources. And so it was really good to hear some leadership coming from the government of Alberta on this.
Yeah, I was talking to Tracy Wilson from the CCFR the other day, and we were talking about just the amount of police resources besides the gun buyback, which, I mean, what a misnomer. How do you buy back something you never owned in the first place?
Yes.
But just the allocation of police resources to find these guns, because so many of them are moving from completely unregistered all the way to prohib. The SKS is a great example of this. I think they think maybe there's 200,000 or 300,000 of them in the country. They've largely, most of them are unregistered, were never registered.
No.
How I would suggest the numbers probably double, by the way. But how are you going to find them? You're going to hire more cops who should be fighting real crime to kick in farmers' doors and ask them, do you have an SKS in there?
Mm-hmm.
How do you even do this? The cost to the taxpayer will be enormous.
Just imagine. I mean, we can't even fly our governor general on a quick trip to the Middle East without blowing,
Right.
nearly, 6 digits on in-flight filet mignon, and then not have the bureaucrats completely fib to committee about, oopsie, forgetting the receipts. That alone almost cost $100,000. That one trip. Imagine this now of bureaucrats going throughout rural Western Canada to try to find firearms that they don't even know exist. Like, the cost would be astronomical. And again, we just don't have this money. Like, folks, like, Canada is, closed as far as extra spending goes, more than $1 trillion. If you started counting right now, Sheila, it would take you 30,000 years to count to $1 trillion. Like, the Ice Age was more recent. It is a crazy amount of money. So just folks, put money towards police tracking down the gangbangers and the criminal drug lords and all those folks who are using smuggled guns quite often. This would be a waste of time and money.
Now, one of the other things the reason I reached out to you is because you, as a brand new Albertan, but it feels like you've been here forever, you are celebrating the fact that we don't have a provincial sales tax. And again, I sort of forget these things because, you live at home, you pay what you pay for things. Yeah. And it is a lot cheaper here than Toronto. I go to Toronto and I'm like, you want what? How much for a case of beer? What?
How much are my pickles here?
Yeah, exactly. This beef jerky is made in Alberta. Why are you charging me so much for it? But, I forget that life really is a quick 7, 8, 9, 10% cheaper. All things being equal, just because we don't have a provincial sales tax.
It sure is. And it's funny you mentioned that because a lot of the guys that I work with, my colleagues, right, they've either lived here their whole lives or lived here for a long time, right? And so while they really care about the PST, I mean, we even got Daniel Smith and all the rest of the leadership candidates to sign a pledge saying, I will never impose a PST or raise taxes. So we're all super, hyped on this thing. But as far as the day-to-day expense goes, these guys like you, they're like, oh yeah, of course, because you just pay what you pay. But no, being a new arrival from British Columbia and being someone who does the primary, heavy lifting for the shopping, because I'm the wife and mom, right?
Yep.
I sure notice if I'm not paying a PST. And so I couldn't help myself. I actually first did this back during Halloween. I'm like, we don't even pay 7% PST on candy here.
Yeah.
Like all my tacky witch decorations out front, I didn't have to pay PST for that. Like, let's do the math for fun, because that's what I do for fun, is a calculator. And so I worked out how much we were saving, and I did the same thing for other provinces. But this time, this was holiday shopping. So I contacted the consumer specialists in the United States, because we use their data all the time. The Canadian ones even say, just phone the States. And so they calculated from American Thanksgiving to New Year's, not including booze. How much do people spend? Now I was kind of surprised, but then when I did the math, it's not that way out there. Apparently, the average person will spend around $1,100 for that entire window on stuff like decorations, candy, presents, clothes, like fancy soaps, all those things that you would give at Christmas. And so I sat down and did the math. Sheila, even if only half of Albertans, like I lowballed, if 50% of us participated in that shopping, we're each saving about $80 a person, not including booze. And then I did the scary thing and I figured out what our neighbors are paying across Canada. Now, typically they're paying out about between $70 and $100. But boy, oh boy, in Atlantic Canada, they're paying out about $113 a piece. A piece. Like their provincial sales tax is 10% in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, and Prince Edward Island. And I've lived there. It's expensive. And these folks don't have extra money kicking around. Like It's not like it's a booming industry sort of place. So yeah, we're really saving money here. It was around $80 a person.
And it's funny because you often hear people on the left, big government types, arguing, well, you just tack on a PST, you'll get out of debt. No one will notice. But you notice when your pocket's being picked every quarter to the tune of $125.
Yeah, you sure do. And to give you an idea, it isn't just the little stuff. See, I did that for Christmas because it's something everybody can relate to.
Right.
You can relate to going Christmas shopping and spending that money, or you can relate to saving that money. Like $80, you could get a kid's new bike for that. You could get that video game that your son or daughter's been asking for. I could pay for my entire turkey dinner with that and have extra left over. So that's serious dough. But when you look at the big ticket items, especially compared to my home province of British Columbia, the PST really kicks you hard there. They hit you with PST on like you just said, like the academics like to say, oh, you're paying a PST on your yacht. Well, excuse me. That is so intellectually dishonest.
Right.
Who has a yacht? I literally don't know anybody, but I know lots of people who've bought a used car.
Yeah.
And they charge you 12% PST on used vehicles there. Sheila, they charge you PST on thrift store items.
No.
Yeah. I know. Like I'm a frequent Value Village flyer because I'm a nut job and I love treasure hunting and I want to save money and it's actually good for the environment.
Right.
So I go all the time. And yeah, you're charged PST there on almost everything from that store. And it's same thing at other smaller thrift shops. Like if you go to like those ones that help the hospital or whatnot, I kid you not, you're paying PST. And that really bugged me because who's shopping at those places?
Right.
People who are low income, who are poorer, who want to save money, who need to save money. So they're leeches when it comes to PST. I'll tell you a great story if you've got a second.
I got all the time.
Okay. So we're talking big ticket items. So when I was researching this a couple of years ago, because I can't stand PST, I found this crazy story. So in the mid 2000s, around there, the BC government under then Premier Gordon Campbell got wise to the fact that smart British Columbians were timing their big purchases on things like appliances. So your washer dryer, your new fridge or a wood stove, whatever it is, they were timing that for when they took their summer trips out here to Alberta. Because, of course, you're saving. Sure. Hey, man, you're saving minimum 7%.
Yeah.
Minimum. If you get a good deal out of it, blah, blah, right? That's great. Well, those bloodsuckers in the provincial government of British Columbia caught wind of this. They contacted big box outlets like Costco and apparently groups like The Brick, right? Yeah. And they said, hey, can you take pictures of the cars from British Columbia and send them to us, send their license plates? Also, we'd like your sales receipts so we can track them down. Why? Because they wanted to track down British Columbians who had dared buy a dishwasher in Alberta and nail them with a PST. Like, that's so gross. And thankfully, the companies told the government to go fly a kite and they won in court. They had to go to court and they won. So the government had to slink back under its little PST rock on that. This is to point out that while I might be making fun of, not paying PST on candy or decorations or whatever, that's the little stuff that saves you $80. It's the big stuff too.
Yeah. And really, at the end of the day, it hurts BC retailers, right? Because they are having people, BC retailers, they don't have a choice. They have to charge PST, but they're losing their sales to Alberta retailers because of the tax regime. And we see this all the time with, the carbon tax. We see this with investment into the oil and gas sector with the carbon tax. It's real easy to go from southern Saskatchewan to North Dakota.
Sure is.
It's literally the same oil field. But one of them has a carbon tax and one of them doesn't. And one of them has a much easier set of environmental protocols and regulatory hoops to jump through than the other. And it just, what do they call that? Leakage?
Carbon leakage is kind of a gross term, but yeah,
it sounds like a medical condition you probably don't want to have. But it happens all the time, and you see it in retail. You see it when with competing tax regimes. But as Albertans, we're probably happy to reap the benefits of it.
Yeah, we sure are. And even just the cross-border gas shopping in British Columbia, people used to back up all through Sumas, the Peace Arch, on the weekend to go fill up their vehicles because they're saving like 30, 40 cents a liter just in the taxes, right? Including the 2 carbon taxes that British Columbia nails their folks with. So yeah, you would wind up saving a ton of money shopping here versus there. And you're right. You'd wind up losing out as a retailer in British Columbia because of this. But again, it's difficult to get the academic types who influence government. It's like worm tongue, right? Whispering into the king's ear.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to get them to listen once it's in. And so that's why the CTF has been so clear, because this is the last best place that doesn't have a PST here in Alberta, is don't put one in. Because getting rid of it once it's in there is next to impossible. So stop it before it starts.
Now, that's, I think, probably the last thing before I monopolize your day that I wanted to talk to you about is our new premier, Danielle Smith. She's saying and doing a lot of all the right things when it comes to fighting inflation for Albertans. That's one of the things that I like about her, although she is a politician, so I'm always open to being disappointed. Jason Kenney, I'm talking about you.
We had somebody sign a carbon tax pledge once. You might remember that. Yeah.
Very publicly sign it, by the way. Like, we're not hard of remembering or seeing. Like, we see the picture. But she is not just saying things, she's actually doing things. And one of the big things I noticed in my 16-year-old daughter, who drives a diesel vehicle, so she's getting really hit at the pumps, or she was the pause on the fuel tax for Albertans. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I think it's only going to be for 6 months, but I sort of hope it's a permanent thing, because if you didn't need it for those 6 months, I don't think you ever are going to need it again.
I like the way you think, because that's exactly what I'll be saying about 5.5 months from now. Yeah. So credit where it's due. We spend most of our time yelling at politicians to do the right thing. And so when they do what we want, it's like patting your horse or giving it a carrot. Good job. So yes, it's very good they did this. They fully suspended the fuel tax, which at its height is typically 13 cents per liter of gasoline and diesel. I'm glad you mentioned the diesel, because of course that reduces the cost of pretty much everything, because pretty much everything we eat and use is delivered to us on a truck that, survey says, uses diesel.
Right.
So we pushed and pushed and pushed, and we got them to do this. And so credit where it's due, she did it. As of January 1st, the entire 13 cent per liter of fuel tax is suspended in Alberta for at least, and they did say at least, so there's your wiggle, the next 6 months. And so what this means in normal people talk is that this saves you around $10 or so when you fill up a minivan, saves you around $15 every time you're filling up a pickup truck.
Yeah.
And $15 is nothing to sneeze at when you're filling up, because I can get a roast chicken and a jug of milk for that. Right.
Right.
That's real money back in your pocket. And it also will hopefully have a cascading effect of affordability, because like we said, everything is delivered to you on a truck. Right. And when you're saving that money, hopefully that means you have that little bit extra to go towards your groceries. Something that alarmed me, and I keep an eye on it, and I have for years since my days in talk radio, is the use of food banks. And the use of food banks was way up in the past year and a half, including here in Alberta, especially over the last year. And so if that means that mom is keeping that extra $15 a week, right? You add that up, that's 60 extra bucks a month you're saving minimum just on your vehicle. That hopefully will go a long way, along with the other relief they're providing. Thankfully, we have a surplus here due to our abundance of natural resources. Our caution going forward to the government is make sure that you guys are figuring out how to use the Heritage Savings Fund to a good effectiveness. Because if they play their cards right, and they put enough of that resource money into it now over the next few years, we could eventually not have an income tax here. For real. If we played our cards right in Alberta, we could actually use that Heritage Savings Trust Fund to eliminate, imagine, not having an income tax in Alberta. So it would be miraculous. And that is something that Premier Smith, I almost called her Danielle, that Premier Smith has said that she's personally interested in too. So we're really happy to hear that.
Now, all that is to say, the Liberals are planning to just transition us into, I guess, unemployment. So I guess for me, watching the Premier and where my journalism meets advocacy is making sure that she does what she says she's going to do and fight back every step of the way, as the Liberals plan to impose more taxes on us, take away more of our autonomy, and attack our oil and gas sector while imports to the country face no sort of consequences as far as greenhouse gas emissions taxes go whatsoever.
Yeah, so far we're seeing good signals that way, right? So tax-wise, just to give you an idea, just taxpayers' perspective-wise, because of our lack of pipeline capacity in Canada, meaning we're not at the full capacity that we should be based on the green lights previously given by government that were then axed, we've lost out on around $13 billion over a 10-year period. That's only in federal income taxes that would have been taken from the workers during those projects. That's not even touching municipal property taxes or royalties or any of the other funding that we would get from such projects. So that's a lot of dough. You could build like 10 really nice hospitals for that. So one in each province. That's just from the lack of pipeline capacity. So when we see any premier, we want to see this take off like wildfire across Canada. We hope every premier of every party in every province starts acting like this and standing up to Ottawa, especially when it comes to things like this, because this will save taxpayers money. More money will be in your own pocket and in your own bank account, meaning that you can better provide for your family and you're less of a burden in the future on the state. This is all win-win-win. And so, for example, when they turned around and we saw the justice minister and the CFO stand up and say, you know what, this gun ban thing you guys are doing, we're not only going to instruct our police to not pursue this, we're also going to, what was the term they used carefully? Give guidance to the Crown to not pursue charges under this. Not talking about gun crime, talking about the seizure of firearms that Prime Minister Trudeau wants to do. So that's a good signal. You know, that's a pretty contentious issue. It takes courage to stand up and explain it and articulate it and say, we're not going to be spending money on this. Thanks, but no thanks. Stay in your lane. And they did that with firearms. So if they're willing to do that with firearms, then I imagine they're probably going to be willing to do it when it comes to energy. And again, there's a million things that Canada can do to reduce its emissions if it wants to. And it's already doing that, apparently, according to businesses here in Alberta. And I speak to this personally because, like you said, I'm from BC. I reduce, reuse, recycle. I rode a bike for 13 years. You know, I literally swam with the salmon. You know, I'm a little bit hippie, right?
Yeah.
I'm outing myself now, but I did live on Vancouver Island. I care about pollution, and I think most people do.
Yeah, I'm a farmer and a hunter. Like I care about nature. If there's no nature, I don't eat.
You won't find a better conservationist than a farmer or a hunter, right? And so I'm saying all of this because British Columbia has had the highest carbon taxes in all of North America since 2008. And guess what? Their emissions keep on going up. Why? Because the demand right now for things like oil, gas, gasoline, natural gas, so the basic things of transportation, home heating, right now, they're what an economist would call, Franco is probably laughing at me, inelastic, meaning you can't switch to paper bags.
Right.
So most people can't just switch right now. So we got to drive to work. We got to heat our homes. And most of the time that means using gasoline or natural gas, et cetera. So that you're seeing the emissions keep on going up. So all it is a punishment. Because right now, again, in the future, who knows? We could have hydrogen or dilithium crystals or who knows? Right now, we don't have an abundant, affordable, dependable, alternate energy source that average moms and dads can just switch to tomorrow and plug in. We don't for the vast majority of us. And so that's why it becomes this really unfair punishment, especially in winter, to have carbon taxes like these. And so that is why we started doing research and saying, you know what? Just saying, you can do carbon recycling that companies are doing without cost to taxpayers. They make everything from fertilizer to pharmaceuticals to vodka with this stuff. And you're not costing taxpayers money. You're employing people in the business. And you can also export more natural gas to places like India. And then you're reducing their use of animal dung and old wood, which they're depending on hundreds of millions of them every day for heating and cooking. You want to actually tackle the big end of the arithmetic problem on pollution and emissions? Dude, sell your natural gas to India. They're asking to buy it. Yeah. So our point here is that you can be a small e environmentalist and really care about air cleanliness and pollution and all that stuff and not cripple industry and not saddle taxpayers with massive bills.
Yeah, and just circling back to Premier Smith on all of these issues, I hope we see from her, and I think we're seeing it so far, what I would call the DeSantis effect. So DeSantis was the first governor who sort of stood up against lockdowns, and then Texas was like, yeah, me too. And then South Dakota's like, yeah, you know what? Good idea. Let's do that also. And then Wyoming and then Oklahoma. And so I think we're seeing her be willing to do the unpopular thing in the mainstream media. I think it's generally popular with the public. And she's taking the slings and arrows and giving the other premiers the courage to stand up. When she stood up against the gun ban, Saskatchewan immediately followed, and Yukon then followed. And it was a knock-on effect because she was the leader. And I think it is incumbent upon Albertans like you and me to encourage her to lead on these freedom issues and these taxpayer accountability issues going forward.
Yeah, and she can, and she is so far. We want to see her keep up that good work. I think, I've spoken with her off and on at different conferences and stuff because we had similar jobs, right? Both in broadcasting, all that stuff. We're similar in age. And I also know Andrew Lawton, who you know, and he's told this story before where he would fill in for her. So I'm not telling tales at a school. He would fill in for her on Calgary radio. And so he would see the panel of calls and text messages. And so she took a lot of slings and arrows after what happened last time around years ago here in Alberta. So maybe she's got that rhinoceros hide that I think a lot of politicians need in order to get some of this tougher work done. And again, like you point out, it's only unpopular with some sectors and some folks. The vast majority of people want lower taxes. They want less waste. They want more accountable government, and they want government to be smaller and to mostly stay out of their business. Yeah. And so in my perspective, these are kind of populist and popular things for her to do around average people. So that's all we're seeing so far. We hope it keeps up. Yeah. Because we do have ways of holding politicians to their promises.
Yes, we do. Both of us in our unique little ways. Kris, now I could talk to you all day, but can you let us know how people can support the work that you're doing with the Taxpayers Federation? Because unlike the left-wing advocacy groups on the other side of this, you don't take any money from the government. You never would. So how do people get involved? Also, you guys have a great line of t-shirts, by the way. I was like, why don't I have one of those?
I should send you one to defund. We have defund the CDC. Trudeau can't take these guns. It's for, the folks who work out, right? It's the fun stuff. Yeah. So thank you for that. And yeah, we don't even give you tax receipts. Right. Like, we're not a charity. We're a not-for-profit. And we did that for many reasons. One of them is so that you don't even get a tax credit if you donate to us. We're super persnickety. So if you go to taxpayer.com, that's our main website. And you know what? Go through our petitions. We got something there for everybody. If you really love free speech, we're fighting hard against C11. If you want to protect your property and not have, this wasteful gun grab happen, you can sign up against the gun grab. If you want to defund the CBC and you want to cancel the media bailout, we're fighting hard on that too. So sign the petitions that most interest you. And what that does is that makes you part of our standing army. And so the next time the government does something sideways or wastes your money, or there's a big bill coming up, or a certain person in caucus needs pressure right now, then we all mass email at the same time. It's like critical mass, right? So that means you're part of the army and you're part of the solution, and it gets results.
Kris, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a shame that it's been so long since I had you on again, but hopefully we'll do it very, very soon.
Oh, you betcha. See you soon.
Thanks, Kris. This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by...
Adam Sos here for Rebel News. Our company is growing quickly, and we'd actually like for your company to grow too. That's why this ad space that I'm speaking through right now is actually available for you to purchase. So instead of people listening to me, they could actually be learning about your company, learning about your business. If this interests you, if this is an opportunity you'd like to capitalize on, send us an email at ads@rebelnews.com.
Boy, I love Kris Sims. I hope to have her back on the show again very, very soon. Now, this is the portion of the show where we invite your viewer feedback. Unlike the mainstream media, we actually care about what you think about the work that we're doing here at Rebel News. And so we want to hear from you. Now, I give out my email address. It's Sheila@rebelnews.com. Put Gun Show Letters in the subject line if you'd like me to read your question, query, comment on air. Or you could leave a comment wherever you find us on Rumble or even on the censorship platform of YouTube. Now, there are nearly 1.6 million of you who watch us on YouTube. I don't know, out of convenience, out of habit, maybe. And normally I don't take the comments from YouTube, but like I said, there's 1.6 million of you. And while YouTube discriminates against conservatives, I'm not going to. And if you watch us on YouTube, let's take a look at your comments today. This is on my interview with Tom Marazzo. He was a key player in the Freedom Convoy. And it was sort of a wrap up of 2022 and where we sort of think the state of Canada and civil liberties is going in 2023. Loretta Koch writes, so thankful we have Danielle Smith here in Alberta until May. Freedom reigns for 5 more months at least. Now, in May is when we have to go to our statutory election. Can't really go beyond that. We have fixed election dates here in Alberta. And mainstream media polling, which I think is largely done in urban areas, primarily the socialist hellscape of Edmonton, say that the UCP, United Conservative Party, headed by Danielle Smith, and the NDP, the Socialist Party, are neck and neck. I'm not sure I believe that Albertans are willing to burn down the house to fix the wallpaper in the dining room again, as we did in 2015 when I mean the collective royal we, not me at all, elected the socialist NDP, and they laid waste to agriculture and oil and gas and the province's finances for 4 good years until Jason Kenney took power as the leader of the newly formed United Conservative Party. So I don't think Albertans are going to make that same mistake again, although, boy, I think the media would love for them to make that mistake again. I just don't see it. I'm optimistic about my fellow Albertans not making the same mistake. Liberty in Peril writes, hey, make sure we never forget that wonderful patriotic experience from last year. Let's celebrate every year at the end of January, the day the convoy arrived in Ottawa, for our freedom and for the unity it brought to our beleaguered nation. We can't allow Trudeau, to brush this off. It is our country and it was amazing. T-shirts, flags, and rallies. Party on. I think a lot of people are going to mark the convoy, although I don't think they are going to mark it in the big way that I think a lot of people might expect or want them to. And that is because of Justin Trudeau's actions in euthanizing the convoy protests by invoking the Emergencies Act, which allowed for the arrest of the leaders on trumped-up charges, which in the end became mischief, but also seizing assets, bank accounts, and canceling insurance of not just convoy participants, but people who supported the convoy. And I think that has put a chill across anybody who wants to protest the regime again. It's just, which is why they did it, right? Like, that's why Trudeau did it, was so that people who were thinking, well, me too, I could protest. Now you won't because you stand to lose too much. It's what authoritarian people do. They make examples of some people to discourage the others. And so I'm not sure the convoy commemorative protests this year will be as large as I think they would be in normal times if we had a normal, not tyrannical government in Ottawa. Mr. Tess, 1962, writes, thank you, Tom and Rebel News, for being on the right side of history. I had to leave my job and didn't work for 6 months, I'm sure because of the vaccine mandate. But I'm very glad I did not cave, and I'm proud of all the Canadians like yourself who stood up for your rights to choose what does or doesn't go into your body. Well, it wasn't just standing up for individual rights, although that's a good enough reason for anybody to protest. But a lot of the people who went to Ottawa in the Freedom Convoy, many of them were vaccinated themselves. And many of the people who supported the convoy from afar were vaccinated themselves What they wanted was for other Canadians to be able to have the choice, because choosing between feeding your family and getting a vaccination you don't want is really no choice at all, is it? And as Tom always points out, it was never a vaccination for a lot of people against a disease. It was a vaccination against unemployment. Well, everybody, that's the show for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see everybody back here in the same time, in the same place next week. And remember, don't let the government tell you that you've had too much to think.